Hello, friends. It's been a while, but welcome to episode number 71 of Nostalgia Talk. I'm James. I'm back, and joining me for episode number 71 is Pat Giles.
Hello, welcome, welcome. I mean, I thank you for having me, rather not welcome, the inverse of that. Nice to meet you, James, virtually. I just learned about maritime, which is very exciting. I've worked in Central Time and Mountain Time and Pacific Time, but never maritime. This is a new
Yeah, or
zone.
or or
That's
or
very
sometimes
exciting.
known as Atlantic Time.
Atlantic time. See, I didn't know what Atlantic time meant. I thought it meant Eastern Standard Time because I'm on the Atlantic. I didn't think it was like in the middle of the Atlantic. So,
Yeah, it's pretty. Yeah, I'm like right on the coast. Like I visit the Halifax Harbor very, very regularly. So
wow, that's so cool. Wow, that must be
yeah,
beautiful.
yeah. My
Well,
my 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 college actually had a view of it.
wow, that's so cool. Well, I'm in the island of Long in New York, off of
Nice.
off of the New York City. Not many people know this, but Brooklyn and Queens are part of Long Island, as my uncle would always tell me. I grew up in Brooklyn, and he would say, Brooklyn's in Long Island, and I'd be like, no, it isn't. But it is in fact part of the same island, and but I'm out in Huntington in New York, but also just grew up here in I grew up in Brooklyn and then moved out here when my wife put something in my drink and then moved me out here.
Well, for anybody who doesn't know, Pat is, contrary to popular belief as of now, not a geographer. He is an animator and a
No, Frank,
cartoonist.
that's not been my expertise in geography is not why I'm here. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he could be, but that's not what he's known for. He is a cartoonist and animator who is art director and designer for various Disney shows such as Stanley, PB&J Otter, and Doug, and also did designing for some of the various cereal mascots, such as, and I know that none of the listeners can, but I can, behind him, the Trix rabbit, the Cocoa Puffs bird, Count
Sunny. His name is Sunny
Sunny.
the bird. Yeah.
Thank you. We actually don't have Cocoa Puffs here.
Yeah, no, Canadian law.
Mm. But we do have some of the other ones that I can see back there. Count Chocula, Frankenberry, and Boo Berry, also known collectively as the Monster cereals. And speaking
Yeah.
of, to all you listeners, as you guys know, I've been doing little Halloween videos lately in the form of Nostalgia Talk bonuses. I am going to do one on the Monster cereals. I just bought Count. No, I've had Count Chocula for a while. I bought it in Moncton when I went to go visit my sister. And I just bought Frankenberry and Boo Berry. I am on the hunt for the new one, Carmela Creeper. Maybe I'll do an individual one of that, but I'm gonna stick with the three classics. So you'll see that really, really soon.
That's amazing. Well, so my big thing with them was that I designed the characters that were on the boxes from 2004 to about 2008, what we referred to as the big face cereal boxes. And it's this one, if you can see, if we could point to it, I'll send you pics of the ones that I design. But then we also did various like animated shorts with them, which was
Oh,
really
nice.
exciting. But the Lucky the Leprechaun, the Honey Nut Cheerios Bee, the Trix Rabbit, Sunny the Cuckoo Bird, the Green Giant logo that's on your food right now, that was me and my team. And then also I literally wrote the book on the Pillsbury Doughboy about like what his all like his motivations were and everything, and like we built now this is one that is like 10 or 15 years old by now, but it was like the first real digital Pillsbury Doughboy with a company in Toronto, actually, which was really pretty fun. And then I was at Saatchi and Saatchi, and then in my own agency, had the General Mills account. So I wasn't there. I wasn't really a designer. It was just kind of lucky that I knew how to design, but I was the creative director with a guy named Manny Galan, and the two of us were like in charge of all the animated stuff that General Mills produced for about 10 years. which was really exciting. And then we went and did the same for Hasbro for a while, which was just a very different experience to go from cereal to toys. But in both cases, I was always like the outsider in advertising because I was really a cartoonist. That's really all I was there to do, So,
Mhm.
but my favorite Disney show to work on was Stanley for sure.
Mhm.
That I was with from the very beginning to the very end of like the movie that's never been seen, a Great Big Book of Everything movie that like I think aired once. I don't know why it's so mysterious, but I also did a season of Daria and a season of Sheep in the Big City. I don't know if that there's actually there was an ad behind this plant that was on subways for Sheep in the Big City that I stole off the subways, which was pretty cool. And but I knew, Mo Willem. I know Mo Willems. He's a great guy, and the pigeon who drove the bus.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
love those books.
yeah, he created a show called Sheep in the Big City, and I was one of the designers on the show. And
Mhm.
not surprising, I designed all the fake ads on the show. And then, but more recently, what I'm doing is a few, lots of different things. One for the last 4.5 years. Yeah, can it be? Yeah, 4.5 years. I built Holler Studios, which is a YouTube channel that posts lots of shorts about characters that are based on our stickers. And so that's been really exciting. We built a channel that's got about 75 million views, which is really exciting. And then, a new old project about 10 years ago, me and my partner on this project, Manny Galan, and he and I did like all of the General Mills stuff together too. Not all of it, but a lot of it. The Cartoon Lagoon, Captain Cornelius Cartoons, Cartoon Lagoon, basically, and I'll drop a trailer to you, but it's about three tiny puppet sailors in a tin toy submarine as they go fishing for old cartoons, and they then make fun of the old cartoons or not, or just watch cartoons. But there's like stories in the submarine that happen, and then they cut to a cartoon. So it's like a very classic, almost like format of hosts of a cartoon show, but they themselves are puppets with animated faces. It's really, really bizarre.
That's
We
interesting.
Yeah, we had sold the YouTube license to Stars back in 2012, but they only had it for a limited time, and now it's back to us, and so we're re-releasing them right now. So that's been like something I'm working on, which is really exciting. And then there's a project that I can't tell you about.
Okay.
Another cool thing that I did along the way, the reason why I uh, it's really important to mention Count Chocula and Frankenberry and Booberry. We did, and I love to share with you, we animated uh, a record that was on the back of the boxes. So like we were nostalgic for our own childhood and when we were doing this stuff. Like when I started working in cereal commercials, to me it was just the greatest possible job ever because I grew up with all of these characters. Like I knew all of them really well, and I knew their histories and stuff. And so Count Chocula was like among my favorite. And I always wanted to do like a longer form story with them. And in 1979, there were albums that were like on the back of cereal boxes that were little radio plays. And these radio plays then were the source of this piece of animation that I'll show you, um, in talk show format, in talk show parlance, show the clip. And then we animated them like 30 years later, but then we teamed with my buddy Jeff Almassian, who's a Grammy winning composer for Elmo and Grouchland, among other things. And produced Pentatonics, and like really great guy. He says, hey, we want to take that and remix it, because the plot was they wanted to go out on a set. The Monsters, the plot of this record was, it was the height of the disco era. And so the Monsters want to go out on a Saturday night and go disco. And so,
that was a spot on Count Chocula impression, just from what I've seen in the commercials.
That's great, thank you. And as Larry Kenny would say, who's the voice of Count Chocula, he would say, "Don't do that again."
Sorry, Larry, if you're listening, but
Sorry, Larry,
he's really good.
And so the cool thing was that then we remixed it to be then like a dance track, and that did really well on YouTube, which was really exciting. And then so I'll share that clip with you.
They could call themselves the Slash Street Boys.
Although
I think that already exists.
Where were you? Oh my God. Well, is that already a thing?
Yeah.
Well, our premise was that they lived in a castle in North Hollywood, like that was like run down, but in a nice neighborhood otherwise, but where like older actors would live. And so they were kind of trying to get back into horror movies, and they were just terrified by Jason and Michael Myers and all that stuff. Like, it was too scary for them, so they like go home. But the crazy thing that then happened, because the story does take a crazy left turn. I'm talking to my buddy Jeff one day at his studio soon after we had remixed this piece, and he says, "Oh, guess who heard the track? Do you know Amit Zappa, Frank Zappa's son?" And so I don't know if you know who any of these names are, but Frank Zappa was one of the.
Zappa is. Yep.
There you go. Thank you. But for lots of folks, I found like younger folks, like under 30, didn't know who he was. And Frank Zappa was one of the greatest guitarists of all time, one of the most prolific songwriters, one of the most prolific musicians of the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. And then he tragically died of cancer. And his kids are Amit, Diva, Dweezil, and Moon Unit, or Moon Zappa. Valley Girls was, oh my God, Gag Me with a Spoon. That really comes from one of his songs. And they, the family, they didn't. Well, let's rush up to the present. My friend says, well, Amit wants to meet you because he's a really big Count Chocula fan. And I was like, are you kidding? And so I meet him, and then we like I tried as hard as I could not to talk about the fact that his dad was one of my favorite musicians growing up, but like, don't talk about the family business. And then we became like fast friends because he loved animation, he loved comic books, he loved children's books. We collaborated on stuff. We animated a pilot open for him. We did projects together, and just like liked each other's company, which was nice. And then years go by, and I never talk about the family business. And he's finally he calls me, and this is after having worked together on lots of different projects. He's like, "Hey, do you want to help me I want you to help me bring my dad to the stage as an animated hologram." And I was like, what? And so I will show you a clip that nobody's really seen. It's not really public. I mean, there are things on YouTube where people have filmed these performances, but we did basically the very first fully animated, like pop-up book live concert. It was insane. It was like 12 screens and a giant hologram screen, and we made like monsters come to life. He was a robot, he was a giant hot dog. It was kind of crazy. And
that's the crazy thing about animation, is that you can do whatever you want with it.
Yeah. And the weirdest thing was that Frank had the foresight to envision this in a book that he wrote in 1990. He actually said in one of the chapters that one day, it was kind of crazy, well before smartphones, one day you're going to be getting your music from the phone, which, like, how did he know that?
Fortune teller.
Uh, and that he wouldn't have to leave his house because he could just simply be a holographic projection to concert halls around the world. And that kind of was really inspiring for us, because then he also had the foresight in 1975 to film himself and the band, all on separate tracks, live, basically put on a concert in a soundstage. And that gave us an isolated live performance of him from this 1975 footage. And so what we were able to do was animate him fully, every expression, every little thing. But then that was to a click track, and then the live band played to him in 1975. It was kind of crazy. Like, the live band was on stage playing, but he was playing live, but just from 75, but it was like not a, like, it had a raw quality of a live performance because of that. So it didn't seem very canned. It seemed like, oh my God, this is live Frank. The guitar solos were just insane, and those became opportunities for just beautiful, amazing graphics. And all of his songs were really visual. One of the pieces that we did was a song called Cheapness. He had he loved monster movies, and so the cheaper the monster movie, the better for him. And so
It works especially if it's animated.
Yeah, so we brought to life the story of this song called Cheapness, which was about the cheapest monster movie ever made. And basically a monster movie comes to life on stage. It's so cool. And it toured New York, like the Northeast of the United States. I think a couple of dates in Canada, and then the north west of like Belgium and the UK. And then they took a break, and then COVID hit. And so, one day maybe that show will get back on the road, but I think it was very expensive to produce. The traveling with that much equipment was really, a big deal. But it was the coolest concert I've ever been to, like, and I don't, it's like I worked on it, so I don't, but we did half of the songs. And then another animation company called Fantunes from the Valley out in LA. They did most of the 2D animation, and we did a lot of the stop motion and the puppetry. And Brian Hames, who's a Henson builder, built a lot of the puppets. And Keely Snook was the art director and built a lot of the sets with Brian. And it was just really thrilling to see, like, and that was in 2019. And then just before that, I did a web series for Sesame Workshop called Lillian Tordo's Opposite Show. And so I'm all over the place. I went from Sesame Street to rock concerts. But Lillian Tordo's Opposite Show is about a dog and a turtle who are total opposites. And we illustrate to preschoolers the differences between big and small, and fast and slow, and that there's not a value to those.
It really is the opposite show. Wow.
Yeah. And it was really fun to do that. And it did really well for Sesame. It got like 30 million views.
Nice.
And each time we do something, it's always produced in some new or novel production technique. And I think that's the exciting thing, that if you look at my work, it's very different, because again, I'm more a problem solver for some challenge that's being given to me. I would never have thought to animate Frank Zappa stuff. It's like the work itself was the script.
Mhm.
And then I should shut up and let you ask a question because I haven't.
So I was going to start off by asking you, how did you get inspired to get into animation? Like, how did this journey begin from Sesame Street, Disney
Yeah.
serials, Frank Zappa? Like, how did it all start?
I always feel extraordinarily lucky that I have never had any other thought in my mind since I was 4. It really was so strong where there was not anything else that I was ever going to do for the rest of my life. I saw a cartoon, this will date me, but a cartoon called Gigantor, and it was the very first anime. I think, if not the first, maybe Speed Racer was the first. I don't know, but those two were really just real critical in the formation of my brain, and Looney Tunes. And I just knew, and I also, with the first $5 I got, bought just a ton of comic books. And so I either wanted to be a comic book artist, or an animator or an illustrator or a cartoonist of some sort. And that was all I ever thought of. And then I went to art school to SUNY Purchase and did study. I went to SVA, but graduated from Purchase. And then um, got, I think, a pretty good foundational education in art, so that, understanding the human figure and how it moves, and, backgrounds, just like real getting the my technical skills forward. But then during that period, I got a job in children's clothing. And so I immediately in college was drawing like t-shirts and stuff for uh, um, a company called Wear Me Apparel that would, had Walmart and Sears as clients. So I was like right away working, and I always got lucky being a working artist. And after school, I ended up at another apparel company. And then we had the license for everybody. This company had like Looney Tunes, Batman, the whole thing. But I was just taking the style guide art from all of the studios, slapping it on t-shirts, and like submitting it to them for approval. I wasn't making anything new. And so I had just gotten married. I was in my late 20s, and I was doing a comic book at the time, like an underground comic called Marshall, and I sent it to MTV and to Jumbo, and just kind of like, hey, here's my book, literally. And I got nothing from MTV at first, but Jumbo, I got a call, and they wanted me to do a drawing audition, and it was kind of, or a drawing test. And so it was kind of amazing because I worked over Thanksgiving weekend to do a Doug test. And what happens is you get a script, and then
Are you
the,
referring to Doug the TV show?
yeah, yeah. And
Okay,
then,
perfect. So like, was that
uh,
your first
yeah,
job in TV animation?
yeah, yeah,
Okay, great. That was actually going to be my next question.
yeah. So then I get a test for Doug, and it was at Jumbo Pictures in New York. And then I spend Thanksgiving weekend. The way the test works is they give you about 2 or 3 pages of a script, and then in that 2 or 3 pages is a scene in which you have to design all of the props, all of the characters that appear in the scene, and they all have to be in the style of Doug. So they were, never seen like a chef or a pizza or a whatever, um, uh, and then you also have to then draw Doug himself, as if you know how to draw Doug. And I struggled with this for 4 days. It would just beat the life out of myself. And I send it in, and by fax, by the way, that's how old this story is. I fax it to Jumbo, and 5 minutes later, I get a fax back from Jonathan Royce, who then became my boss, my dear friend, and co-creator of Lily and Tordo for Sesame a few years ago. But he faxed me back a ton of just notes, like corrections on all of them, like so fast, drawn much, much better than I could do. And then I go in and I meet him, and I do another round, and I send another set of drawings in. He takes the drawing and he flips it over on a light box and like shows me everything that's wrong with my drawing in 30 seconds. It was like, oh my God. And not mean, just very like, here's what's wrong, just very analytical. Which I really appreciated, that everybody there was better than me. So I was getting better by everybody just kind of politely pointing out, oh no, it's like this, or you should do this, or whatever it is. And I could see the change in my personal drawings, like from one day to the next, just dramatically different, because now I was in a pool of people that I was sitting next to Chris McCulloch, who then would create Venture Brothers, sitting next to Martin Wittig, who was on Tin Head and the Tin Head and Cup show, I think, or was like, what's the game on
Oh,
Netflix?
Cuphead.
Cuphead, thank you. Tin Head and Cuphead. Yeah, Cuphead. Martin Wittig, like one of the main designers on Cuphead. Um, uh, Enrico Casarosa, the director of Luna at Pixar, Bill Pressing from Pixar,
Yes. Yeah,
Matt
that
Peters from Warner Brothers. Like all these folks were like sitting around me, which was Miguel Martinez Hoffre from Beavis and Butthead. Like he had just come from Beavis and Butthead, and now he's I think on Blaze and the Monster Machines. But anyway, like this was like being with just the Harvard of New York folks. And I I feel like I got better working with them. And then they rolled me right off of Doug. I did a season of Doug, like 31 episodes, and then they rolled me over onto PB&J Otter. So I was with them for, I think, about a 3-year run. And then Daria called and was like, hey, you want to? So I left and went to MTV. Oh, in between there, I did Sheep in the Big City too. And then Stanley after Daria, which was great. And then I also worked on Codename Kids Next Door for a while, not a long time, about 7 episodes, storyboards that Tom and them were great. Mo was on that show too. And then a show called JoJo Circus, which was also
Yeah, I actually have.
have JoJo Circus in here, but I'm glad. But
awesome.
I am
Cool.
glad that you brought up PB&J Otter, because for that show and a lot of those other shows that you mentioned, such as Doug and Stanley. Before I ask this question, I just want to say Stanley was one of my favorite shows in my single digit years. I truly
Okay.
love that show. And in fact, getting ready for this, I rewatched a lot of it. I had a day. I went to a full week-long event all last week, and then right at the very last day, I got really, really sick. I'm okay now. I just had a
Good.
cold.
Okay.
It's because this whole month has been nonstop go, 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 go for
Yep.
me.
Yep. Yep.
Um, so I guess I just got a little exhausted. So I just spent a day at home and watched some shows, and Stanley was one of them. I was like, I might as well just watch some of these shows to get ready for it. And there was so much about Stanley that I'd forgotten about. Like I remembered that he was just a kid that was willing to do anything. And upon that's all I remembered about it. So then he and the animals are talking like, well, what kind of animal could we get to do this? I think it was getting an apple out of a tree. And so they open the great big book of everything. And as soon as the dog and the cat start singing, it's the great big book of everything, I was like, I remember that now.
Oh, it's so funny. The music on that show is great. I loved the dog and the cat. Oh my God, Harry and Elsie. And I loved Dennis. Like I thought Dennis was such a funny comedic foil to Stanley.
Yeah.
And Dennis's little goldfish bowl was always a real fun source of like different designs and stuff. A guy named Keith Gardner was the person, he designed all of the goldfish bowls. And so
Nice.
there was always like, and or costumes of Dennis I loved that we were able to do kind of ridiculous, fantastical things. One of my favorite things is that we got toys made of, well, I mean, we didn't make them, Disney made them,
Oh,
but
that's
this was
cool.
dad. and a guy named Piero Peluso designed Dad. What I designed on Dad was his beard. I literally, we had a design of Dad, and we tried 50 different beards on him, and that was the winning beard.
That's
And
hilarious.
and I designed Mom with Piero. And then I think Miguel Martinez Joffre designed Lionel. I designed Marcia Mimi, I think with Tony DeStefano, and then I think Miguel designed Lester. What happened was Miguel, uh, previously mentioned from Beavis, was going to be the art director before me, and a guy named Nash Dunnigan, who then Nash Dunnigan was like the art director for the Charlie Brown movie for Blue Sky. So like he's amazing. Uh, those guys were leaving. They were going to start. I think they were like early World Leaders Entertainment, I think, was the company that they eventually formed, but it was called something else. Noodle Soup. They were going to form Noodle Soup, and so I lucked out and I left Daria and I got Stanley, but only a few characters had been designed at that point, and I think Nash designed the neighborhood, right? But then we got to design the whole world with Linda Nettleship designed a lot of the world. She's amazing. And then that show, just kind of building it then from that ground up, was really thrilling, because then every week what I loved what they did was, I don't know if it was obvious in watching them, but we would find something that was important to a kid, and then we would find some zoological fact that could be a way of talking about that issue. So, for example, a kangaroo. This was, I think, the pilot. Kangaroo knows how to clean up his room. Like a Joey knows.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. That's one I watched the other day.
yeah. That was the pilot that ended up in the first episode. And then it was always interesting to see how it would tie together. And then for me, I think one of the best things that we did was the Stanley Dinosaur Roundup movie. I really enjoyed that a lot. That was basically 3 episodes that were tied together to do a movie. I'll send you pics I have of concept drawings from script stage, and
Cool.
it's really fun to see how far it evolved, into the final thing. We were sadly John Ritter's last film. Um,
Oh.
he died. He recorded for us, and then like died under 6 months later. So we were his. It was released posthumously,
And
which
for any
was
of the listeners
good.
who don't know who John Ritter was, John Ritter was one of the funniest actors of on television. Like he
In his
was
80s,
on
90s, yeah.
he was on Three's Company. He was on the first season of Eight Simple Rules. I feel like if because that show was going on still after he passed away, I feel like if he was still with us, that show would still be going on. And
Yeah,
he also
yeah,
was the title character for Clifford the Big Red Dog. And like he
yeah.
constantly makes me laugh. My best friend was just in town from overseas, and I introduced her to Eight Simple Rules.
Oh, that's so great. And his son is Jason Ritter.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. And so but then also Randy Quaid was the bad guy in the movie, which was kind of crazy. So it was Jason Ritter and Randy Quaid. It wasn't theatrically released, but it was released on DVD, which was exciting for me. I didn't work on the Doug movie. In fact, the reason why I got hired was because the regular crew for the Doug show got moved over to the movie. And so for 31 episodes that they had on order, they had to hire a whole new crew. So me and Mike Foran and Martin Wittig and Freba Adams and who else, a bunch of other folks were brought on to be the new crew while the original crew did the movie. So it was really exciting. The movie was being produced while we were doing the show, so it was really just a fun time. Otis Brayboy, who has directed Crapopolis, is directing right now Crapopolis for Fox, was on the show and the movie. There's so many great people from that crowd. And then the crazy thing that then I guess after where were we? We were on Stanley. So after Stanley, I would say then I worked on Codename Kids Next Door, but I had lunch with a friend, Moss Friedman, and he was working on Cocoa Puffs, which again isn't there in the States, but Sonny the Cuckoo Bird was really big here. And 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 he was like, "Hey, do you want to meet the guy that created the Honey Nut Cheerios bee?" And I was like, "Why wouldn't I want to meet that guy? I would love to meet that guy." And so I go and I have lunch with him, and I have lunch with his partner, Dave Shea, and then um, I just thought the world of them. I thought they were great. They told me stories of Lucky Charms. Jacques had basically done all the Lucky Charms commercials since 1968. So like all of them that you or I would ever have seen ever, you know, and then, or at least until that point, 2004. And about a month later, I just think this is the best lunch I ever had. I get a call from Dave, Jacques' partner, and he's like, "Hey, come in. We want to offer you a job." And I was like, "What?" I had no experience in advertising whatsoever, and they were like, "Don't worry, that's not what we want. We want, the skills that you already have to bring to us. We'll teach you everything that you need to know about advertising."
Yeah,
They
that seems
wanted,
to be the thing when it comes to film workers and ads, because like I've applied for commercials before, not knowing anything about advertising, just wanting a job on a commercial.
yep.
So,
And so they were like, "Look, we'll teach you. We want to know, we want your ability to storyboard and understand character development and all that." So I I get the job, which was crazy. And it turned out Jacques was retiring. And so they
oh,
had to like hire a few people to replace him. And so it was kind of like almost like the Dread Pirate Roberts, like, "Oh my God, I get to be the next Dread Pirate Roberts." So I end up as the creative director of all of these, all these characters, and it was just really thrilling. And so been a wild ride in animation where I've gotten to see a lot of different angles of the business from a I think a really unique standpoint, because I'm not in like daily production right now. I am in for like web series and stuff, but I haven't done narrative TV, like long form TV in a while. But have like that's the crazy thing is that I'm basically scraping like anybody else. It's a gig economy, and so you have to like put together different projects over time to keep business moving. So
absolutely. Like we've, as we've seen during the writers and the actors strikes, like the show that I work on, we got delayed for that very reason. And like,
that's so cool. What
yeah.
show are you? Did I miss something? What show are you working
So
on?
I the show I work on, it's called From. It's on MGM Plus in America. It's
That's so cool.
like the biggest new horror show in the world these
Are you
days.
kidding? Oh my God, James, that's so cool.
Yeah,
I
I
didn't
did,
do
I
my
didn't.
research properly. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
that's okay. I didn't do the first season. I did the second season. We did get
That's so
renewed,
cool.
but we have to wait. Luckily, the writer's
It's
strike is now done.
over. Right.
Yeah, I actually got a call from somebody that I know who asked us, so, looks like your show might get, and I'm like, yeah, we got to wait for the other one to be done before anything happens.
That's so awesome. What part do you play?
I was a set dresser.
That's so great. That's amazing. So
Mm.
do they shoot there in Nova Scotia?
They do. Yep, there's a soundstage, and then there's an outdoor town that was built for exterior shots.
Nice.
So I
That's
spend quite a bit of time going between
on
both.
set. Oh, that's so great.
Yeah.
That's a great set dressing is I know a bunch of set dressers, and that's a great gig, man. If you can get it, that's very, very cool.
Yeah, it
I've
definitely is
actually
very
got
interactive.
a lot of very big like interesting problems to solve, I would imagine.
Yeah, but we make it work.
Good. No, but what's
I'll put it that way. Yeah.
that's the best part about production is like, oh, we make it work, we
Hmm.
make it happen.
Yeah.
Did I in my rambling pre predict any questions that you might have,
As a
or
matter of fact, you did. And one of the things that you brought up, you were saying you've gotten to work into basically every aspect of animation. That's what I wanted to talk about with JoJo Circus. But actually, before I get to that, can I tell you a funny story?
yeah, yeah, of course.
Just remember, JoJo Circus was when I was in my single digit years. And like, I listened to a lot of what now would be considered retro music, like Backstreet Boys, 98 Degrees, Simple Plan,
Right.
Jonas Brothers, Britney Spears, and Sync, new single coming out this week. Check it out. And I remember, like, I watched JoJo Circus on Playhouse Disney here as a kid, and then like we had Radio Disney for a while, and they were playing JoJo, the R&B singer from the 2000s,
Oh,
and
that's
I
so
actually
cool.
thought that it was JoJo from JoJo Circus. So
That's
JoJo,
really funny.
so a message to the very famous JoJo. If you are listening to this, let me apologize for that.
That's
So
really
for any of
funny.
the listeners who don't know, JoJo's Circus was a stop motion children's
Yep,
series
yep.
that I absolutely loved as a kid. What was it like to do stop motion animation as opposed to hand drawn?
Well, what's really interesting for me is that I don't go anywhere near the puppets.
Okay.
And for that show, I the puppets were actually in Canada and we were in New York.
Hmm.
And so what we would do is design all the characters in 2D first. And so we'd work out all of the characters, what they looked like in just flat color 2D. I built the overview of the town with like three other designers, just to get it like in place for what all the buildings would look like. And then we would send that to Canada. And then 3 months later, it came back as this giant tabletop city that Cup of Coffee built, out of clay and glue and rubber or whatever they do and wire and stuff. And so that was my first experience with stop motion. It was really thrilling to see my drawings become actual objects. And it forced us to work in a way that we knew that they could build, but then they also built things that were like, how did they do that? Like, and but then more recently, doing stuff with a director named Brian Hames, who's a good friend who lives here in Huntington too. He produced and I produced a lot of stop motion together for Frank Zappa, for example, and he's just amazing to watch build stop motion. He built a tiny, well, huge, but what was meant to look like a tiny orchestra that then played on stage. It was like a tiny. It was a stop motion orchestra that eventually they were like 6 feet tall, but they were like this big. And I'll send footage for that since my words are failing the beautiful description of what he made. It's just very different. And again, animation for me is more a team sport. So the thing I do over and over again is more character design, development, art direction, storyboard, like further up the assembly line, I guess. And then generally I'll partner with other animators, either CG or stop motion or even 2D animators, to then bring it to life, because not any one person can do all of it, except for maybe Bill Plimpton and Pat Smith. But they're very focused on just their filmmaking, which is beautiful. But it's rare to be a fully solo on a project that is the scale of generally the projects that I work on. You couldn't produce a series alone, for example. It just not really possible. So I do love, but I love stop motion. And thing that I always wanted to do was stop motion of Count Chocula and Frankenberry and Blueberry, which I'm sorry that I didn't. And then but yeah, so and Cartoon Lagoon is this fusion of stop motion and or rather not stop motion, of 2D animation and puppetry. If you just Google what do you call Cartoon Lagoon, you'll see this look and feel is really interesting. And then there's for Lillian Tordo's opposite show, it was a little bit of a mix of 2D and stop motion, but it was really After Effects. We took these little dolls. They were like this. Let me see. I've got one. My partner on this, Jonathan Royce, showed me this, and it was like, and he built this out of felt. They're basically like felt sculptures.
That's
And
cute.
so what we did was we made two characters, a dog and a turtle in this style, and then we tore them apart and we photographed them at every angle, and then built digital puppets of them. And so it looked like stop motion, but it wasn't. And it's almost like the stuff that I've been working on is Manny and I lovingly call lagoonimation. So it's like, something 3D, but with 2D imposed on it,
So, can you talk a little bit about how prop design works for an animated show?
Sure. So, what's funny is I always felt like prop design was just the secret most fun job on a show, even though people would maybe not want to do that. It's like if a character, SpongeBob's spatula has to be designed, right? Like
Oh yeah.
the Krabby Patty is a prop. Like that's an animated prop. So anytime we would go through scripts, anything that had to be touched or picked up or move that wasn't a background was a prop, essentially. That's the loosest definition I can give. But what was cool was then things like comic book covers ended up my department because they were props. So Man of Steel Man or Beats album covers or Quail Man covers, I got to design all those. If he's reading a comic and then it cross dissolves into the adventure, I get to design the comic first, which is really great. But then if there's a contraption, I get to design the contraption, a car, whatever plot device, literally. And there would always be a dozen or so different major, pieces that would have to be designed for any particular show. It was that, not quite a character and not quite a background, anything in between, the prop designer gets to build. And it's funny, if you're in scenics, you'll appreciate this. A script will call for, there's going to be a phone on the table, there has to be a marker, whatever the things that are, the actor has to interact with have to be part of that scene, but they have to be part of that scene in a way that isn't really obvious.
Yeah, like I did prop assisting on
There you go.
From, and like we had the script called for handcuffs. We had real handcuffs and we had fake handcuffs.
And so that is a really important part of good storytelling, is making those things feel like they are consistent with the universe. And so there's a lot of also opportunity for comedy with props, where something could be a joke basically in prop form. And so as as a scenic, we would you would go through, I'm sure, that process. We would go through the same, where we would kind of nail down everything that we needed for that episode, for the characters to interact with. And it was always thrilling, because it got you to be a better artist. And just the way if you're on a set, it's like you have to be resourceful. The things that we would do research on, what do these things look like, how do they how do they function. And it was the early days of Google too. So like they would literally do Google searches, the production team, and like print out reference for us. It would print out Google Images. It's kind of funny. And so I was prop on on that for Doug. What was interesting about props for Sheep in the Big City was there were whole sections of that show that were all oxymoron fake commercials. And so it was like different soap and all kinds of weird, like non sequiturs that really had nothing to do with the main plot of the show. And so for those, I did the backgrounds and the props, and it was like a kind of a show within a show. So that was really exciting, and got to do a lot of interesting things for that. And so I think overall, what I got a sense of over time is like making things that look appealing on camera and making things that stage well. Like it's all about how you stage things. And I think you'll see in your day job that that's the same thing. It's like, how do you make a screen something pleasant to look at, that pushes the story along, that helps to tell the story of a scene. There's an awful lot that can be told in a story without dialogue, just simply by what what the scene is setting up. And so backgrounds, I also did backgrounds, not as many for PB&J Otter. For PB&J, I was more character and prop, and then but then did start doing backgrounds. And because I kind of had studied fine art, it was not that big of a deal to jump from that to there. I had like a academic underpinning on how perspective worked and how trees, how to draw a tree. And so I really, really enjoyed diving into background design. Those were, and some of my favorite background designs that I've worked on were from Stanley. And I wasn't the lead, I was only the art director. The background designers on that were Chris Palesti and Linda Nettleship and Kim Misko, who were all three of them brilliant. And but it was really fun to design backgrounds in that show because it was much more like cut paper, very graphic. I don't know if this reference makes any sense, but more UPA inspired.
Yep.
So UPA was very 50s animation that was inspired by Cubism and a lot of modern art. And so I loved that aspect of it. We were very inspired by backgrounds from that era for Mr. Magoo. I don't know if you ever saw Mr. Magoo Christmas
I have
Carol.
seen a little bit of Mr.
Magoo, yes. As a matter of fact, it's funny you mentioned Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol. You know who Abe Levito is, right?
I do, yeah, absolutely.
I
Yeah.
did a Nostalgia Talk tribute to him last year with his daughter Judy.
Oh my
And
God, that's
she
so
was
great.
so impressed that I was invited by her and Jerry Beck, who was my most recent guest on Nostalgia
Oh my
Talk.
God, that's amazing.
I was invited by them to do a piece on Jerry's cartoon research blog
That's so
on Abe
cool.
Levito for his 100th birthday, because I invited Judy to Nostalgia Talk. I said, "Do you want to do a tribute to your dad?" This year, 2022, would have been his 100th birthday if he was still alive.
Oh, wow.
And if you want to do a little tribute to your dad, I'd be happy to. And I get this email back from her, and she's like, "We had no idea that it was going to be his 100th birthday."
Oh, that's so cool. Oh my God, that's so great.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's thrilling.
Because Abe is very legendary in the business as an animator and as a director as well.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think he's important to honor.
There were two other things that like from that era that I got lucky to work on, and I'll share both of them with you. I don't know if you know this, but so for Stanley, we were very inspired also by Mr. Magoo, Rocky and Bullwinkle, that whole kind of era. And when I got to General Mills, I found out that they sponsored and still owned most of the rights to Rocky and Bullwinkle. They owned all the TV rights to Rocky and Bullwinkle. Underdog, Tennessee Tuxedo, um, uh, what's Peabody and Sherman, and that whole era, right, was produced by General Mills, and their media arm was still distributing them for television because they own them. And I said to my boss, like, why are we not doing a new Rocky and Bullwinkle? Like, it didn't make sense. And so over the years that I was working for General Mills, or for one of their agencies, um, I kept coming at them like, why aren't we doing something new with these characters? And eventually got to the door of Classic Media, to Doug Schwalbe, who was now he's at Superprod in France, but he was then the head of a Classic Media for development, and he was with DreamWorks for years, kind of handled the sale of Classic Media Library to DreamWorks. And so I reached out to him, and he was like, we've been waiting for 20 years for somebody to call us. Like, virtually, we've been waiting for like 10 years for somebody to call us from the agency. And he explained that basically, that they were in the same situation. They couldn't do anything with the characters unless we wanted to, and the team at General Mills wanted to. And so I kind of pushed all the parties together. Long story short, we made a new Tennessee Tuxedo short that then you could only get with like a code on the box, of Trix cereal, which was really fun. And so I'll send you a Tennessee Tuxedo short that we made in 2014, I think. And so that was really fun. But then for a short time, while we were working on that, we were executive producers for the reboot of Underdog. And it just never got made. We could just never get it out of, and so there are so many projects. I always, when I meet folks in the business, particularly if I'm, like in an interview or whatever, I always ask them, what was the project that got away that you weren't able to do, that you weren't able to make? And that one was Underdog. That's the one. For me, that's the one. We got so close, and I'll show you the animatic. We wanted it to be that Underdog gets shot in space by Simon Bar Sinister in the late 60s, and then gets frozen in a block of ice. And it was just before the Avengers came out, so we were parodying it at the right time. And he gets frozen, and he wakes up, and Simon Bar Sinister has basically taken over everything. And he's like, basically, Rupert Murdoch owns TTV, owns the newspaper that Polly Purebred works for. And then all of the villains from the Underdog show are now like the mayor of New York, and the like Riff Raff is the mayor of New York, and
an ironic twist.
Right, ironic twist. And Tennessee Tuxedo and Chumley partner with Polly Purebred to find the frozen body of Underdog, and then they like kind of team up and come back and stuff. And it was just such a bummer that we couldn't get it made. But I'll send you the animatic. It was the one that got away.
Right. Wow. So a lot of the shows that we've talked
About, such as Doug and PB&J Otter and Stanley, were all created by the same guy, Jim Jinkins. What's he like?
He's a beautiful guy. He just is a lovely man. I think in some ways, was just the luckiest, and I say this in a good way, like just got such a lucky moment in New York animation where he was able to really be the provider of a lot of animation jobs in New York City for many years to a lot of us. And it's just a sweetheart, really. And what I loved about his work was that, we probably, as the younger group, were much more cynical and hardcore than he ever was. And he just wasn't, and he was genuinely a nice guy. And that showed in the work. I think his voice is more, like present in Doug as terms of like him personally. Like I think he is Doug, whereas PB&J Otter, I think is more of a world that he built. You know, if that's a, you know, Doug is probably more autobiographical than PB&J Otter is. But his imprint was, you know, is strong. But I had dinner with him and a bunch of us in December. I just love the guy. I think he's a sweetheart, and you know, he'd be a great person to talk to. He I think, you know, it was prolific also, you know, and I feel like you know, it's really hard to get one hit show, much less like five. So
he's like
He's kind of like the Norman Lear of animation, because like Norman
exactly,
Lear,
yeah, the Norman Lear
Norman has had
yeah.
so many hit
He would
shows.
love that. He would love that. Please tell him that. He would really love that. But just again, he just genuinely a really sweet guy. And but also, you know, for me, I was on the, you know, there were other folks that worked more day to day closely with Jim. I worked really closely with, you know, Joella Marlowe, Melanie Grisanti were my producers on shows, or Jeff Buckland as a director, or Jonathan Royce. And, you know, but over time, you know, I said this to Jim at a party recent, like a couple of years ago. If not for him, like I wouldn't have had a career in animation. So that's why I'm so grateful to him, because he did really create a fertile ground for animation in the 90s.
That's great. Hi, Jim, if you're listening.
Yeah.
So to wrap it up, we've talked a lot about the monster serials. You talked about how you got involved in that. I'd love to ask you, what's your thoughts on the new one, Carmela Creeper?
I love her.
Oh, okay.
I'm jealous. Jealous is my first response, because for years I wanted to do a female character. I would have loved to see more of a Bride of Frankenstein kind of deal, but I get that Universal Studios owns that image, and so they probably couldn't go there. I haven't tasted the cereal yet.
Me neither. I mean, I saw it available, but I had an event to go to, so I was like, maybe I better not.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to, you know, actually taste it, but I'm really proud of them for doing it. I think it was really smart. And I do like it. It just encourages me more that those characters have to come back to life. Now my plot would be much more of a murders in the building, where Carmela Creeper would be the Selena Gomez, and Count Chocula is Martin Short, and Frankenberry is Steve Martin. So, you know, that I think would be, you know, only murders in the castle. Did we just come up with this? Did we just write this, James? Are we gonna?
Well, I mean,
pitch it. Let's pitch it.
We'd get sued, but probably.
You know, it's parody. It's parody.
Exactly. Yeah.
So only murders in the castle. I like that.
Or only murders in the grocery store.
Only murders in the cereal aisle, right? Yeah, yeah. Only cereal murders in the castle. I don't know where this could go on, but James, thank you so much for reaching out, and I'm psyched to meet you. I really am very thank you.
You're very welcome. And to all you listeners out there, as I said earlier, the writer's strike is now over, and I'm hopeful that that means that the actor's strike is going to be finished soon. Not just for the show that I work on, but also, as you guys know, there are actually a couple of nostalgia talks that haven't even been announced yet, that when the strike was announced, like, sorry, but we gotta wait. And I'm like, damn it. So, and there were a couple, there's not many of them, like at least maybe like 4 or 5. But a couple of them, like, I'm really, really excited to announce, but I can't because we don't have any.
Because it's not over until it's over.
Yeah, and that combined with the fact that we don't have anything concrete yet. Like, I get asked, oh, who's the next nostalgia talk? This is the way that I do it. Like, I send the invite, and then once we get a date established, then it gets announced.
Good.
So,
well, thanks again for your patience with me and rescheduling, and I'm psyched to have had this time with you.
Not a problem at all. And I'm very happy to have had the time to chat with you as well. And to all you listeners, there are some nostalgia talks on the way. This week, I actually was talking to two people who are going to be upcoming guests really soon. And I'm also working on another retrospective, and it's almost done. And you'll see my target is to have that out this Sunday, October 1st. So be sure to check for that. And in the meantime, peace.